What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about some of the best smartphones with the Snapdragon 865 chip. So these older flagship phones I think are excellent to pick up to use for years to come, and they're at a really great prices right now. So let's go ahead and get started with one of my favorite phones, the LG V60. This phone got the Android 12 update recently, and it's just been super smooth since then. I'm going to make an updated video about that, but the price on this phone, it still sits easily well under $300. You can find it. And it's just an awesome buy. It's got an aluminum frame, glass back. It's IP68 dust and water resistant as well too. You also have a POLED display at HDR10 plus. It's 6.8 inches, so it's a very big phone at 1080p, 395 for the PPI. So you also have dual screen case capability with the V60 as well. So if you wanted to add that case on, it's like extra $100 on eBay, but it's definitely well worth it if you're somebody that likes to do true multitasking. If not, then it's definitely fine as a standalone phone. But the Android 12 update, like I said, super smooth on here. Snapdragon 865 chip, Adreno 660 on here, and it is just a blazing fast phone now. Gaming on here is still very good. I did a gaming test recently. You guys can check out. I think the only gaming counter struggle with was Fortnite, but everything else was running very smoothly. So you do have micro SD card support, 128 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM on here, which is very nice because a lot of flagships or a lot of the newer flagships don't have SD card support anymore. This phone also has pretty phenomenal stereo speakers on here, great bass quality, great audio quality from the top speaker as well too. And also another highlight with the V60 is for a die-hard music lovers, you do have a headphone jack with a quad DAC. So if you have a really good pair of headphones, you can get some really amazing sounding audio out of the V60 as well too. So it's definitely one of those full featured flagships for a very cheap price that I think you guys should definitely consider. All links will be down below. And you do have NFC on here. The fingerprint scanner is under the display. It's not the fastest. It is a little bit faster with the Android 12 update to me, but it does work 100% of the time. I don't have an issue with it. Now, you do have, in my opinion, very good camera setup and also a really good manual mode on the V60, a 64 megapixel standard with a 13 megapixel ultra wide. You also have a 0.3 depth sensor. It shoots in 8K 30, and then you have a 10 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 4K 30. Overall image quality, I think, is still pretty good on the V60, especially, like I said, that manual mode is really nice on here. And then, the ultra wide is pretty close to the main lens. The main lens gives off some pretty natural colors. Overall, I think it's a pretty good camera. So the battery life is also another highlight. Excellent battery life on the V60. It's a 5,000 milliamp battery with wireless charging as well too. You can easily squeeze around 6 to 7 hours of screen on time out of this phone. Also, this phone has excellent standby time as well too. So yeah, so the V60 definitely a great phone to consider. Next is the Samsung Galaxy S20 FE 5G. So this phone is really awesome as well too. This phone typically is still going for close to 400 to 350 bucks. This is a really great phone if you are a Samsung fan. So this one does have an aluminum frame. It has a plastic back, but it does not feel cheap at all to me. I think it's still very well built. It's IP68 dust and water resistant. This one has the Super AMOLED 120 hertz display, so it's a very smooth, very fast display. At an HDR10 plus at 6.5 inches, it's 1080p and 407 for the PPI. Overall, it's a very good display. It has a small little punch hole in the middle, and it's a completely flat display as well too. So I really like the display on here. Now, the thing about this phone is that it got the Android 12 update, One UI 4.1, and it's been blazing fast since that update. If you guys want to check out those features, I have tons of videos on it. And yeah, so this phone just got faster. The Snapdragon 865 chip on here is just blazing fast on here. Adreno 650 is on board, so your gaming performance is going to be pretty good on here as well too. I was able to play pretty much most games at high settings. This phone also retains the SD card support, which is really sweet. You also have 128 gigs of internal storage, 6 or 8 gigs of RAM depending on your configuration. This phone also it gets rid of the headphone jack, but You do have really nice sounding stereo speakers on here as well too. They're tuned by AKG. They actually sound pretty solid. This phone has NFC. The under the display fingerprint sensor is pretty fast on here as well too, and they even throw in the Samsung desktop support on this phone as well too, which is really sweet. Now, this phone actually still has really good cameras. It's got a 12 megapixel standard and an 8 megapixel telephoto that does 3x optical zoom, and then a 12 megapixel ultra wide that does 4K 60. In addition to that, it has a 32 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 4K 60. I'm always impressed with the image quality that this phone is able to produce. Even though it doesn't have the super high resolution cameras, I think that anybody would snap a photo with this phone and they'd be pretty impressed with detail, with the color. Low light shots are also pretty decent on here. Video is pretty solid. So I really do like the cameras on the S20 FE. I think they're pretty solid. Battery life is also pretty good on here. It's a 4,500 milliamp battery, 25 watt charging with reverse wireless charging at 4.5 watts, and then wireless charging at 15 watts. This is a phone that can easily go for 6 hours of screen on time as well too. So overall, this is a very good buy considering that it's at a pretty good price right now. Next is going to be the Oneplus 8. This is a very impressive phone, and I would say the best gaming phone on the list, surprisingly, because I guess Oneplus optimization, it just plays everything at very high settings. Fortnite 90 frames, Call of Duty 90 frames, it plays everything at 90 frames. This phone, design wise, it still looks pretty good. Looks like my 7 Pro that I love so much. It's an aluminum frame, glass back on here. It's a fluid AMOLED display at 90 Hz. It's HDR10 plus at 6.5 inches. It's 1080p panel, 402 for the PPI. Overall, it's a really nice panel. It's got a slight curve to it. I love the colors that this panel produces. It's got the punch hole on the left hand side. Overall, very good panel here. I think another highlight with this phone is that this phone is going to be upgradable to Android 12 with the Oxygen OS 12. And Oxygen OS has always been very clean, very fast for me. You also have the Snapdragon 865 chip with the Adreno 650 as well on here. In gaming performance, in my opinion, I think this phone does an excellent job with gaming. The only thing about this phone is there's no SD card support, which sucks, but you do have 128 gigs of internal storage and 6 gigs of RAM. I just wish this phone had SD card support. Now, my version is 8 gigs of RAM. I think majority of the versions online are going to be 8 gigs of RAM, but just make sure to, pay attention to that. You also have stereo speakers, which sound pretty good. No headphone jack on here. This phone does have NFC. The fingerprint scanner is extremely fast on here, which is one thing that I love. Now, the cameras on here, the cameras are okay. I don't think that this has the best cameras on the list at all. I would say, and I think it has the worst cameras. And as you can see from the shots, they're not bad at all. But compared to the V60, compared to the, Samsung phones, I would not pick this over those phones. So it's got a 48 megapixel standard, a 16 megapixel ultra wide, a 2 megapixel macro, which is trash, and then you have 4K 60 video, and then a 16 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 1080p 30. Now, image quality is pretty good. It's just the coloring is always kind of off with this phone, so you have to do a lot of color correction. But in general, it will take pretty good shots, I think, for the average person. I'm just saying, if you're really want the best camera, I wouldn't go for this one. So this phone also has pretty good battery life, 4,300 milliamp battery, and very good charging speed at 30 watts, which is something that I love. But this phone does lack wireless charging as well too. So I personally really love this phone for the gaming experience and Oxygen OS. Alright, so next is the ROG Phone 3. So this is an excellent phone. It's a very niche phone for gamers. So if you're not, really into gaming like that, then I would go with another phone on this list. One is that the design on here is absolutely awesome. It's got the RGB lights on the back, and it just go great with your gaming setup. So if you care about that type of stuff. But you have aluminum frame on here. It's just a really nice looking phone in my opinion. You have the pressure sensitive zones on here, or the gaming triggers, which they're like, you can think of them as like touch buttons on the phone, which I wasn't a huge fan of. They're okay, but if you're a gamer, you might like it. What I was really impressed with is this phone has an AMOLED 144 Hz display, and it feels extremely instant, extremely fast. I love the display on here. You're gonna really love that for gaming. It's HDR10 plus. It's at 6.59 inches. It's 1080p 391 for the PPI. One of my issues with this phone is that ASUS is really slow with updates, which I hate. So this phone got Android 11 like super slow, and it's probably going to Android 12 very slow. You do have the Snapdragon 865 chip plus on here, and then the Adreno 650. This phone is going to be excellent for gaming. It maxes pretty much everything out. It's just really smooth. ASUS has a ton of optimizations that you can do and stuff like that. It's just really nice. Now, my only thing with this phone is there's no SD card support, which is odd to me for a gaming phone. You do have 128 gigs of internal storage and 8 or 12 gigs of RAM. You also have amazing sounding speakers, some of the best speakers that I personally heard to this day. They're front facing speakers, they're 2 dedicated amplifiers, and they sound absolutely nuts. So just excellent sounding speakers, tons of bass, super loud. It is a great experience, especially for watching movies or gaming. No headphone jack, unfortunately. NFC is on board. The fingerprint scanner is very fast. Also, another highlight with this phone, a 6,000 milliamp battery, 30-watt fast charging. This phone is impossible to kill in a day. It is crazy good for battery life as well too. You can actually use it as like a power brick as well too to charge other devices. It is just straight up excellent for battery life. The cameras are probably the worst thing about this phone. It's a 64 megapixel standard, 13 megapixel ultra wide, 5 megapixel macro, 8K video, 24 megapixel selfie that shoots in 1080p 30. It's okay. The images are just okay, especially compared to all the other phones. You can tell that they weren't really worried about the cameras, or they kind of, glossed over it, which makes sense because it's a gaming phone and not a lot of people are going to care. But yeah, cameras are just okay. They're not that great. Last, I want to go ahead and mention the Sony Xperia Mark II. This is a really great phone. It's also a very kind of niche phone as well too. So this phone, I think it's still kind of an expensive phone as well too. It's got I think a really beautiful design on here, aluminum frame. It's IP65 and 68 dust and water resistant. It has the OLED display on here at 6.5 inches. A very tall phone as well too. It's a 1644 by 3840, so it's a 4K resolution phone with 21 by 9 aspect ratio, 643 for the PPI. So it's like a movie watching phone, sort of, if you think about it, if you want to watch stuff in 4K on your phone. This phone, it does run kind of a stock version of Android, Snapdragon 865 on here. It has micro SD card support, 256 gigs of internal storage, 8 or 12 gigs of RAM. This phone has stereo speakers. It does have the headphone jack on board too, NFC. The fingerprint scanner is side mounted on here, so it's physical. And Sony does a lot of stuff with their actual camera software, which a lot of people appreciate. Their manual mode and all their software features, there's a lot going on here. So if you're really into like taking certain type of photos, then you'll really like this phone. It's a 12 megapixel standard, 12 megapixel telephoto, 3x, and then you have a 12 megapixel ultra wide using 4K, 24, 25, 30, and 60, and then an 8 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 1080p 30. Has the 4,000 milliamp battery with 21 watt charging. Battery life rating is pretty good on this phone. So overall, it's a very good phone. But like I said, it's a very niche phone for people who are kind of into the whole 4K screen thing. So be sure to let me know what do you guys think, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.